Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk. The biotech world is drowning in failed trials. Up to 85% of drug candidates never make it past phase 2. Now, meanwhile, artificial intelligence is being hyped in every industry. Yet when it comes to clinical trials, most AI is stuck playing at the edges. Now, NetraMark claims it's the one company turning AI into a surgical scalpel, eliminating massive error rates, predicting trial failures in advance, and reshaping how drugs get to the market. Today, we're not here for fluff. We're peeling back every layer for investors to gain the real knowledge on NetraMark. This is not just another overpromised code base. This story is based on fact and backed by a big punch. Now, I'm joined by George Achilleos, CEO of NetraMark Holdings, a man betting his own reputation on AI-powered clinical trial precision. You're about to hear questions investors really want to know beyond the data sheets. George, thank you for joining us today and sitting with us.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsay. Always a pleasure. I love telling the NetraMark story.
Now, George, let's start with the core of your value proposition here. You said Netra AI can identify hidden patient subgroups and dramatically reduce error rates in clinical trials. So for investors who don't live inside the biotech world, can you walk us through exactly how your platform changes the outcome of a trial and really where the biggest financial upside is created here?
Yeah, that's a great question that I get all the time. So we can look at this from both parts, the technology and the financial upside. So there's two financial upsides and two main things that one main thing that you're really looking for, which is I'm spending millions and millions of dollars on my clinical trial. And when you get to later phases, which I'm talking phase 2 and phase 3 in particular, the failure rates in phase 3 are 50 to 65%. Depending on the therapeutic area. So imagine you spend millions of dollars to get all the way through phase 2, and then you have a 50 to 65% failure rate in phase 3. You're going to spend another 40, 50, sometimes 100 million or more in phase 3 and fail. So the whole premise of NetraMark and the Netra AI technology, think of it as investment protection, number one. Can I protect the amount of money that was invested in this drug up until this point? Can I protect the investment I'm about to make on phase 3 and make sure I can have or increase the chances of success of a phase 3 trial? I can improve the 50 to 65% failure rate so that all of that investment isn't going down the toilet. And just to give you some examples, if people are following any pharmaceutical companies, they often report their clinical trial data. And what you'll see financially, if you will, on any given day, I've seen billions of dollars of market cap eroded on a trial that actually passed phase 2, but not at the expectation of the investment community. It marginally passed. Or what the investment community is saying is, there are other depression drugs, for example, on the market that seem to have better results out of phase 2 than this particular pharmaceutical company's, and the markets are punishing. So when that happens, the question really becomes is there a way to protect my valuation? Is there a way to protect the investment that I've had? And that's where Netra AI comes in. Imagine the treasure trove of data that a pharmaceutical company is sitting on. They run their phase 2 study. They get a clinical trial data readout at the end of that phase. The question is there an artificial intelligence technology that can be inserted at that point to analyze all the variables simultaneously that are collected, which are somewhere between 500 and 20,000 variables per patient. So imagine you have 100 patients in a study and 10,000 variables. The permutations and combinations of trying to find variables that are associated with drug response issues, placebo response issues, or adverse event issues is in the trillions. So a human can't actually do this. And it's a very difficult mathematical problem to discover those small subpopulations, a coalescing of 2 or 3 or 4 variables that could be causing those drug response issues, placebo issues, or adverse event issues. That's what Netra AI does. It ingests the data, it spits out those variables from the trillions of possible combinations and tells the pharmaceutical company, If you make these small changes to who you potentially include or exclude in the subsequent phase of the trial pre-randomization, you're going to increase the potential success rate and increase the chances that you get through phase through, protecting that investment, protecting the capitalization levels of that pharmaceutical company. Does that make sense? Trying to keep it as high level as possible?
Okay, George, now that we understand the mechanisms a little bit further, I want to actually dive into the pushback here. You know, more so than anybody out there right now, critics argue that AI in biotech is still smoke and mirrors. So great on perfect lab data, not so much in messy human trials. So the question here really is, I mean, what's your strongest proof that Netra AI isn't just overfitting to ideal data? I mean, genuinely, what is making people understand further to that? I mean, what independent audit or external validation backs you up here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lyndsay, one that we get all the time, and I'll give you some examples. Our collaboration with the NIMH, one of the 27 institutes of the NIH. Also, our beachhead client, which is a $10 billion plus NASDAQ listed biopharmaceutical company that has 18 drugs in their pipeline. I'll talk about that. And our recent announcement of our collaboration with the Mayo Clinic. So I think those are three good items that I can discuss that hopefully will give the listeners a little bit more of a warm and fuzzy feeling around whether our technology works. So the first thing I mentioned was our collaboration that we announced probably about 8 or 9 months ago with the NIMH. So the NIMH is the National Institute of Mental Health, which is one of the 27 institutes of the NIH, the National Institute of Health, which is the largest biological research organization in the world. We signed an agreement with the NIMH to analyze their ketamine data. And then the idea of doing these collaborations is to co-publish. So the industry looks at who are you collaborating with, what are you collaborating about, and is there any peer review feedback on it? So what a great partner to have in that the NIMH took a look at our technology and said, yeah, we want to do a collaboration with you. And we have now analyzed one of the first projects with their ketamine data, and we've submitted that. I can't name the publication yet, but it's one of the highest impact factor publications in the world. We've submitted that. We should hear in the next 30 days or so whether or not that gets submitted. And we submitted that with the executive director of the NIMH as one of the authors on the piece that was submitted. So I think when we start to do collaborations with groups like that, hopefully that adds to the credibility. The second thing I mentioned was our beachhead client. Okay, so this is an organization that's that's a biopharmaceutical company that has many drugs in their pipeline, $10 billion plus market cap. We started with one trial. We've then expanded to 4 trials, and now we're bidding on a lot more trials. So the question is, if you start with 1 and then you expand to 3 more, so now you have 4, and now you're being asked to expand to a lot more trials. Why would they do that if there was no value? We've already analyzed 3 of their clinical trials and provided them utility back. That's now made them interested in expanding the relationship with NetraMark. So unfortunately, I can't name the name of the company because in the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of pharmaceutical companies don't like that. But I can tell you it's a pretty massive a biopharmaceutical company, and they've got over 15 drugs in their pipeline. So we've got that. And then about a week and a half ago, we announced a collaboration on analyzing GBM data. If you look at the Form 7, you can see that collaboration was with the Mayo Clinic, which is obviously, I think, a very credible organization that has decided to enter into a collaboration agreement with NetraMark for us to analyze their oncology data. So we're just now in the process of ingesting that data. And so you can imagine there's diligence. That contract, by the way, an agreement, just to give you an understanding, took 18 months to get agreed to. So this is not an easy process to enter into these collaborations. So I think these are 3 key collaborations that I've highlighted that hopefully give your listeners a little bit of a better understanding of who we're partnering with and adds a little credibility to our AI specifically within the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, I mean, these are some big punch backings, so I think we can push that one a little bit further. I know that you actually recently struck a deal with Worldwide Clinical Trials as well to embed Netra AI into active phase 2 as well as phase 3 trials. So congratulations on all of these partnerships. Why don't you walk us through what all of these actually mean to push NetraMark's authority forward?
Yeah, so that is a partnership agreement that I'm very proud of. That took us also probably about a year and a half to get over the line. And just so that you know, Angelico Carta also joined NetraMark as Chief Strategy Officer. He was the co-founder and president of Worldwide Clinical Trials. Worldwide Clinical Trials was bought by Kohlberg, which is a spinoff from KKR, one of the largest private equity firms in the world. They bought Worldwide Clinical Trials for a little over $2 billion. You can, use ChatGPT if you like, and your listeners can find details on that acquisition. Worldwide Clinical Trials is a contract research organization. So in the world of clinical trials, about 70% of those trials are outsourced to a contract research organization to actually run the trials, recruit the patients, collect the data, manage the sites, do all of that work associated with running a trial. So I'm very proud to be partnered with one of the largest CROs in the world. Okay. And furthermore, what's really exciting about this is that we will be embedded into their ecosystem from the perspective of they will be naming this XYZ. I don't know the name yet. XYZ, powered by NetraMark. And the idea is that we will be embedded into all of their phase 2 and phase 3 trials moving forward. We're just finishing the onboarding process. This is a huge company, as I said, that operates in 65 countries around the world. So within the next 30 days, we'll be launching our arrangement with them, and that will yield, a backbone of clinical trials for us from a twofold perspective. Number one, all those bids moving forward, we will be embedded in a lot of those. And remember, they probably run 70 to 100 trials per year. They win a lot of bids per year. So that's a lot of contract backlog for us. And then there's the trials that we weren't around for that are now going to be reading out. We'll also be having discussions with them about running NetraAI through those clinical trial data readouts as they occur. So that is a really real validator of the technology that we've had. And again, that was a year and a half in the works with a very credible, large global CRO.
Amazing. Now, I'm going to flip over here to the risk part. So being in the medical sector, investors look at the risk side a lot more closely, especially when people's lives come into play. So my next question here is where we lay that all on the table. What if one of those trials fails despite your model's predictions? I mean, who steps up to the plate here? I mean, do you bear liability? Does the sponsor, does the CRO? Tell us what happens here.
Well, first of all, that risk, forget NetraMark. That risk exists, Lyndsay. And in fact, the risk is higher without NetraMark. So remember, 50 to 65% of clinical trials fail in phase 3 without NetraMark. So who bears the risk when that happens? Well, the investors lose their money, of course. The pharmaceutical companies lose billions of dollars. Clinical trials have been failing at an egregious rate and burning through a lot of cash for 75 plus years. This is not anything new that's occurred. So there are two situations. There's no way that any artificial intelligence company or any company that has the capabilities that we might have is going to guarantee results of a clinical trial. That's literally an impossibility. And the reason is some drugs just don't work. Doesn't matter what artificial intelligence you have, what kind of statistical prowess you have. If the drug doesn't work, the drug doesn't work. And in fact, in a case with a pharmaceutical company that we worked, we analyzed their phase 2 data, and they were contemplating moving into phase 3. And our recommendation to them was don't run phase 3 because it's going to fail. So they shut the trial down. Why? Because they're now protecting millions of dollars moving forward. Now, they had an inkling that it wasn't a strong signal and they might have shut it down without us. But giving them data to now back that decision allowed them to shut the trial down. So people say, what are you, a trial killer, George? And the answer is if the drug does not have efficacy, if it doesn't work, why would you go to the next phase? You're just going to waste millions of dollars. So in some cases, the answer that a pharmaceutical company will get from us is your drug doesn't work, it doesn't show high levels of efficacy, we would recommend that you don't run phase 3. In some cases, of course, in many cases, we find signal. We tell them how to tweak the trial moving forward, how to change the inclusion-exclusion criteria. And what our expectation is that we will increase the chances of a positive phase 3 study. Now, think about it, Lyndsay. Even if we increased trial success rates by 10%, when we're talking billions and billions of dollars being spent here, that is a huge mover. So trials are going to fail regardless of NetraMark. If they fail because NetraMark was included, we never say that we're going to, with 100% guarantee, cause a trial to be effective. And anyone that would say that, I certainly would not invest in that company because that's highly unlikely. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to actually just flip it just a little bit over to another topic here. The confidence that you were able to explain to us there, that's exactly the proof that we needed. So thank you for that. George, you've publicly claimed NetraMark can deliver 90% gross margins through software leverage, but real pharma deployments demand custom integrations, compliance, overhead, audits, training, support, all the things. Can you clarify for us here, when you say 90%, do you mean for the pure algorithm module only or all in client delivered?
That's another great question because it seems so high that people are saying to themselves, oh my goodness, 90%. In fact, it's more than 90%, but I don't like to say 90%, anything higher because then I get more of a, oh my goodness. So let's just run through this. Okay. You have revenue. Let's say just for round numbers, you have $100,000 of revenue. What's the cost of goods sold that is spun up specifically because we won that engagement? And then that you subtract, and then you get your gross margin, and then you have your sales, general and administrative expenses. Okay. So when I'm talking the revenue, the cost that we incur to spin up an instance for a client is really an instance in Amazon Web Services or whatever cloud environment we're using. This is in the thousands of dollars. So our average project is between 200 and 300,000 US. Our costs that are variable, that are spun up because of a project, is in the thousands of dollars. So in comparison to the amount of revenue that's associated with it, this is essentially a rounding error. The reason I say this is from an IFRS perspective, which are the accounting practices by which NetraMark has to abide because we're a public traded company. The way we've allocated the SG&A is that regardless of whether we are doing any clinical trials assessment or not, there's a cost. We have PhDs that are on staff. We have engineers that are on staff. We have data wranglers that are on staff. So if we had no projects, those are sunk costs that we incur. They're not variable costs that are incurred because we won a contract. So those are sunk costs that are there regardless. When we run a project, we spin up an instance for that client that costs us thousands of dollars. There's data wrangling that occurs with our data wranglers that are on staff. And when I say data wrangling, it's organizing of the data so that the machine can ingest it. That's the data we get from the pharmaceutical company. Okay, we have to organize that. We have data wranglers on staff. If we're swamped, we would bring in some variable cost data wranglers, which for a project, which is 4 to 6 weeks, might cost us another $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for that project. Again, that's why we're saying 90% gross margin, right? We've got Amazon Web Services, variable cost, data wrangler, if needed, variable cost. The rest of it is the machine. It's all automated. It runs in the cloud. It runs trillions of computations. And just to give you an idea of where we sit from a scalability perspective, the machine can currently run about 4 projects simultaneously. Over the next 8 months, we're working on some modifications to how the technology works, where in about 8 months, we'll be able to run 500 concurrent projects in the cloud. So from a variable cost perspective that would go into cost of goods sold, it's minuscule.
Okay.
Does that better explain that?
Yes, absolutely. George, I want to close out our convo today with what every investor is actually dying to see. you're sitting in a very challenging middle ground, not pure AI, but you're not a drug developer. So in the next 24 to 36 months, what's your ideal liquidity event? I mean, is it an acquisition by Big Pharma? Is it a NASDAQ uplisting or a massive payout for contract? What is it here?
Well, the first thing we need to do over the next 24 or 36 months, there's two things we need to do, Lyndsay, that are critical before there's a liquidity event, and actually it would drive the liquidity event. We need reps. So we need to announce contracts, analyze data, spit out results, help pharmaceutical companies succeed. So that's job number one. Job number two is collaborations with the NIMH, with the Mayo Clinic, etc., so that we can put out peer-reviewed publications so the industry can check the box and say, oh my goodness, look at these high impact factor journals that have approved the technology. If we check both of those boxes and build our contract backlog as large as humanly possible, I find it hard to believe that there wouldn't be a liquidity event down the road in 24 to 36 months where somebody acquires us. Now, who would want to acquire us? Okay. It would be a private equity firm that has other pharmaceutical assets in their portfolio. It could be a contract research organization that's looking at this technology and would want that technology in their portfolio. It could be a tech company that could be looking at this technology and wants to accumulate AI assets, etc. So there are multiple potential acquisitors that could lead to the liquidity event. But the other thing that I would propose to you is this, because the next question is, well, what would the valuation be? And I would ask this to any of your listeners, because a lot of the times it's, is it a multiple of revenue? Is it a multiple of EBITDA if you got taken out? I would say this to you. Right now, we're charging $200,000 to $300,000 to evaluate a trial, and that takes us about 4 to 6 weeks to do that work. Now, if we're saving a company 40, 50, 60, 70 million in a phase 3 study, are we only worth $200,000 to $300,000? So what is the valuation metric that we'll be using over time? I think over time, it really has nothing to do with a multiple of revenue or a multiple of EBITDA. What we have to do is, through collaborations and contracts, prove that we can move the needle when it comes to the success rates of clinical trials. And if we can do that over the next 24 months, it's hard to believe that someone wouldn't want to acquire us. But even if they didn't, for sure, if we check those boxes, the value of the stock you would think would go up. So we have work to do. This isn't all done and in the bag. We have work to do, but there's a lot of upside for us and for NetraMark given what we're doing.
Amazing. Well, George, thank you so much for sitting with me today. You shed a lot of light on what so many investors are wanting to know, yet no one is really asking. So I look forward to telling your story and your successes further soon.
I'm always happy to do these.
Again, that was George Achilleos, CEO of NetraMark Holdings, Inc., a company aiming to rework how clinical trials are designed, powered, and delivered using next-generation AI. Now, they're trading on the CSE under AIAI and on the OTCQB under AINMF. And be sure to flip over to learn more at NetraMark.com. Now, this is a company that's shaping up to be one of the most disruptive forces in the biotech AI space, and investors will want to keep a very close eye on how this story unfolds. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk on the Market Frontlines. Stay sharp and stay tuned for more.